didn't come served on a paper plate. Folk music was a reality of a more brilliant dimension. It exceeded all human understanding, and if it called out to you, you could disappear and be sucked into it. I felt right at home in this mythical realm made up not with individuals so much as archetypes, vividly drawn archetypes of humanity, metaphysical in shape, each rugged soul filled with natural knowing and inner wisdom, each demanding a degree of respect. I could believe in the full spectrum of it and sing about it. It was so real, so more true to life than life itself. It was life magnified. Folk music was all I needed to exist.
Can you tell me what you're doing?
At the moment I'm just listening, it's a mono recording, so we're just checking that both tracks are equally clean, or equally noisy in this case. So this was just recorded, was it you that recorded it?
No, it wasn't. It's just recorded with a microphone in front of the TV speaker.
Yeah.
Tenderly William kissed his wife. Her knuckles were white on the kitchen knife. And the swan on the river goes gliding by, the swan on the river goes gliding by. Lady Margaret's pillow is wet with tears. No one has fucked her in 20 years. But the swan on the river goes gliding by, the swan on the river goes gliding by. The doctor gave Sally a sad surprise at the thalidomide baby with no eyes. But the swan on the river goes gliding by. The swan on the river goes gliding by. Little Billy Brown will shake with fright. He has a new uncle every night. But the swan on the river goes gliding by. The swan on the river goes gliding by. My father has cancer. My mother's insane. The girl I'm in love with takes cocaine. But the swan on the river goes gliding by. The swan on the river goes gliding by. When will the swan begin to sing? I am weary of everything. But the swan on the river goes gliding by. The swan on the river goes gliding by. It's fairly traditional ballad form, but the image of the swan on the river, which is the beauty of England, isn't it? And the terrible things that are happening in people's lives. Castle Street meant England, because an Englishman's home is his castle. And the madhouse means what's happening to the inhabitants of this country, or what I felt was happening in the 50s. The play is set in a London boarding house. One of the lodgers, Mr. Tompkins, who one day announces to his landlady that he is retiring from the world. He's going upstairs to his room, and he's going to be there until he dies. And that is the heart of the play, the reactions of people to someone who has renounced the world.
Mrs. Griggs' boarding house, late afternoon. Martha right foreground, Lenny, Mrs. Griggs, background. Pan, Mrs. Griggs left to sofa. Close up Martha, reaction. Mrs. Griggs?
Yes, I like your brother. He's gentle. One day, he was just sitting in that chair staring out across the street. Saturday afternoon it was. That's how he'd spend his weekends. He never did go out very much, but lately that's how he'd spend his weekends. That Saturday afternoon he took off his collar and his tie. He never did that. No, always wore his collar and his tie when he was downstairs. "Mrs. Griggs," he said in a queer sort of voice, as if he didn't understand what he himself was saying. "Mrs. Griggs, I'm going up to my room, and I won't come out until I die." And I said, "Don't be silly." And he said, "No, I'm not. I've seen all I want to see of it, and what I haven't seen, I don't want to see. So I'm just going up to my room, Mrs. Griggs, and I'm going to stay there until I die." So I said, "Nonsense." And he said, "Mrs. Griggs, I'll take my meals in my room from now on." Well, it's not the extra work I mind so much, though the stairs are getting steep for me.
It's a play about what civilization does to the tender-hearted, to people who don't have a great deal of violence in them, who don't have any way of expressing themselves artistically, except perhaps the leading character, the young man, who is trying very hard to get out of this, trying to understand what's happened to Tompkins, who's gone upstairs, and trying to understand the world about him.
Close up, Lenny. Lenny.
Call a policeman, call a doctor, a butcher, a baker, a candlestick maker, call a plumber or an undertaker. That's civilization for you. Call somebody to do your dirty work. Who does the dirty work for the people who do the dirty work?
This character of Lenny, for me, was like, he was the person that rumbled everybody. He was the person that made them aware of what it was to have blood in your veins. And he was the person that created trouble, if you like. Because trouble, out of trouble, we get imagination, and we get the reason why we're here.
Well, I got up in the morning, looked under my bed. I was looking every place with them gall darn reds. Looked behind the sink and under the floor, looked in the glove compartment of my car, couldn't find any.
When I actually saw Bob Dylan playing at Tony Pastor's in 4th Street, I thought, well, this is too good to be true. Because also in the original play, he did play the guitar. And when I heard his songs and I saw him, and he was so young and tousled-haired, and I thought, if I could just get this on, you know. And I was willing to fight to get Bob Dylan to bring him to England.
We met for the first reading of the play. I hadn't met Bob yet, and we were all sitting around a long table. Bob was handed a script.
It's kind of, I remember rightly, if this was the table, he was sitting just there, just slightly to your left.
Yes, from where you were.
Yeah.
Yes, I was on the other side.
That's right.
Yes. Well, we started to read the first page of Pookie Pryor and Ursula, and we got to Lenny's first speech. And Philip nodded to him, and Bob said, "I don't know what I'm doing here. These guys are actors. I can't act. I don't know what I'm doing." So Philip called a coffee break.
Take 5. Okay, everyone, take 5.
So I left this rehearsal in despair. I lived somewhere along the Circle Line, and I thought, I'll get on the Circle Line and I'll think about this, because we only have a week before we start shooting. What changes can I make to the play?
Also, remember, I was determined at that time that Bob Dylan would be in it.
Yes.
And there's no way I was going to relinquish hold on that. We could have just paid him, and we had egg on our face,
Or
etc.
I could have taken all the spoken lines out of the play.
Yes.
But I wasn't prepared to do that. And it occurred to me after 4 or 5 stations that there was only one solution, which was to make the character into 2. one who did the singing and one who did the talking. So we beat around the bush and found a brilliant actor to play the speaking part, David Warner, and Bob as his friend. So throughout the play...
And they were sharing the room?
Yes.
Yeah.
They were in the same room. They were side by side like Siamese twins. David Warner would make the speeches and Bob Dylan would sing.
In the early 60s, we had a television for about 10 years, since the coronation, in fact. We used to watch variety shows like the Billy Cotton Band Show, but hardly ever any plays. We certainly wouldn't have watched something like Madhouse on Castle Street.
My parents disapproved of television and thought it would corrupt us kids. But my father finally gave in and said we could save a penny a week of our pocket money to put towards one. By the time we did get a television, they didn't really want us to watch it, and only things on the BBC anyhow. They really thought that ITV was much too vulgar, though I don't suppose they would have wanted us to have watched something as strange as Madhouse on Castle Street, even though it was on the BBC.
Mrs. Griggs' boarding house, interior, late afternoon. Mrs. Griggs.
It's getting dark already. I think I'll close these curtains. There's not much light in London when winter comes, and it's dark at tea time. When I was a girl, we lived in Devon.
Martha.
Mrs. Griggs, you were telling me about my brother.
Mrs. Griggs hesitates. Bobby sings, "Hang me, oh hang me." Mrs. Griggs.
Bobby, please.
Lenny.
What's the matter with it?
Mrs. Griggs.
It's a very pretty song, dear, but I'm trying to talk to Mr. Tompkins' sister.
Lenny.
Not pretty, Mrs. Griggs, beautiful. It's all about death.
It was very cold. Everywhere was cold. Everywhere was cold. It's bloody freezing. But I was in a group, we called them groups in those days, called the Thameside Four, and we ran a club at the King and Queen. It's Goode Street, just by the Middlesex Hospital. And I look out into the audience and I see this sing out cover sitting in front of me. So I finished a couple of songs, left someone to sing, and walked over to him and said, "You're Bob Dylan." And he looked at me and I said, "I saw you." And he's, "How do you know that?" And I said, "I saw your picture on the front of Sing Out. Do you want to sing a song?" And he said, "Ask me later." So we carried on with the evening, about 20 minutes, and he just looked at me from the audience and went, nodded. So I called him up, and he had a guitar with him, and he played.
I was feeling sad and kind of blue. I didn't know what I was going to do. The communists was coming around. They was in the air, they was on the ground, they was all over.
Well, he said, "What else is going on?" And I told him about the various other clubs. I said, there's the Singers Club in Soho Square, that's a Saturday night club. I said, "There's the Troubadour in Earl's Court, and that's a late night club, starts about 10:30. And he took it all in.
I heard some footsteps by the front porch door, so I grabbed my shotgun from the floor, snuck around the house with a huff and a hiss, saying, "Hands up, you communist." It was the mailman. He punched me out.